What if I told you the apocalypse has already been scheduled multiple times and was only canceled at the last minute? That the end of human civilization wasn't averted by a grand plan, but by a single gut feeling, a forgotten safety pin, or a computer chip that chose the right moment to fail. Today, we're declassifying 27 moments when the world stood on the absolute brink of annihilation, and you never even knew. These aren't just historical footnotes. These are the secret stories of our survival, the terrifying near misses that prove just how fragile our existence truly is. Welcome to Falsum, where we reveal the hidden history of how we're all still here. 1. The single gut feeling. September 26, 1983, Moscow. This is the story of Stanislav Petrov, a Soviet officer on duty when the early warning system shows not one, but 5 American missiles are incoming. Protocol demands an immediate, massive nuclear counterstrike, but Petrov hesitates. He has a gut feeling something is wrong. The alerts are coming from a single station, the system is new, and the number of missiles, just 5, seems too small for a first strike. It had to be a mistake. He makes the world-changing decision to declare it a false alarm against all orders. Later investigation revealed the system had mistaken sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds for missile launches. One man's gut feeling in one terrifying moment saved the world from certain nuclear annihilation. 2. The SARS pandemic. In 2003, a new and deadly coronavirus called SARS emerged. It had a relatively high mortality rate and spread quickly. A massive, coordinated global health response managed to contain it, and the virus eventually disappeared. But if the virus had been slightly more transmissible, or if the global response had been slower, we could have faced a pandemic on the scale of the 1918 Spanish flu, which killed up to 50 million people. SARS was a dress rehearsal for a global pandemic, and we were lucky it wasn't the main event. 3. The nuclear football near miss. In 1975, President Gerald Ford was deplaning Air Force One when he tripped and fell down the stairs. The military aide carrying the nuclear football, the briefcase with the launch codes, fell right behind him, sending the briefcase tumbling across the tarmac. The incident was played off as a clumsy accident, but it highlighted a terrifying vulnerability. The entire system for authorizing nuclear war could be compromised by a simple slip and fall. 4. The Mount Tambora eruption. In 1815, a volcano in Indonesia erupted in the largest volcanic event in recorded history. It was so massive it caused the year without a summer in 1816. Snow fell in June in New England, crops failed worldwide, and global famine ensued. It was a climate catastrophe that led to riots, mass starvation, and disease. It was a stark reminder that the greatest threats to our existence aren't always man-made. 5. The Korean Airlines Flight 007. In 1983, a civilian airliner strayed into Soviet airspace and was shot down, killing all 269 people aboard, including a U.S. congressman. The incident caused a massive international outcry and brought the US and the Soviet Union to the brink of conflict. It was a tragic accident caused by a navigational error, but in the hyper-tense atmosphere of the Cold War, it was almost the spark that ignited a global fire. 6. The dead hand system. During the later years of the Cold War, the Soviets built a fully automatic nuclear retaliation system called Perimeter, or dead hand. If it detected a nuclear strike on Moscow and communication with top command was severed, it had the authority to launch the entire Soviet nuclear arsenal itself without any human intervention. The system was secret for years, and it's unclear if it's still active today. For a period of time, the fate of the world rested in the hands of an automated doomsday machine. 7. The Cuban Missile Crisis Quarantine. During the naval blockade of Cuba, a U.S. Navy ship, the USS Beale, dropped practice depth charges on the Soviet submarine B-59. The submarine's captain, Valentin Savitsky, believed they were under attack and that war had begun. He ordered the submarine's nuclear torpedo to be armed and prepared for launch. This was the moment Vasily Arkhipov, whom we mentioned earlier, stepped in. But what's even more terrifying is that this scenario played out multiple times with different submarines during the crisis. We were playing a game of nuclear chicken and didn't even know it. 8. The day a test almost went live. On November 9, 1965, a massive power outage plunged the northeastern United States and parts of Canada into darkness. At the same time, at Offutt Air Force Base, indicator lights for the U.S. nuclear arsenal suddenly lit up, suggesting that bombs had been dropped on major cities. The system was designed to lock down if it lost power, but a glitch made it look like a full-scale attack was underway. The commander on duty had to make a gut-wrenching decision based on no other information, correctly assuming it was a power-related error and not a real attack. 9. The false alarm at the Pentagon. June 3, 1980. For the second time in less than a year, the Pentagon's warning screens show an incoming Soviet missile attack. This time, it's not just a few missiles, it's a massive coordinated launch. National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski was woken up and was just seconds away from waking President Carter to authorize a counterattack. When he received a call, it was a false alarm. A single, faulty 46-cent computer chip was the cause of the panic. 10. The close call at the K-19. July 4, 1961. The Soviet Union's first nuclear submarine, the K-19, suffers a complete loss of coolant to its reactor near a NATO base in Greenland. A reactor meltdown is imminent, which would have caused a nuclear explosion and likely been mistaken by the US as a first strike. A team of 8 crewmen, knowing it was a suicide mission, entered the high radiation chamber to build a makeshift cooling system. They succeeded, but all died of radiation sickness within a week. Their sacrifice saved the ship and possibly prevented World War III. 11. The forgotten safety pin. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, a U.S. U-2 spy plane accidentally strayed into Soviet airspace over Siberia. The Soviets scrambled MiG fighters to shoot it down, and U.S. F-102 fighters armed with nuclear air-to-air missiles were sent to escort it home. The protocol was clear. Only President Kennedy could authorize the launch of those nuclear weapons. But a later investigation revealed that due to a procedural error, a decision to launch was actually in the hands of the pilots themselves. The only thing that prevented a nuclear dogfight was the pilot's restraint. 12. The misinterpreted radar signal. May 24, 1967. The brand-new U.S. ballistic missile early warning system shows its 3 main radar sites in the polar region are being jammed. Under Cold War protocol, jamming was considered an act of war, and nuclear-armed bombers were scrambled to attack the Soviet Union. Just in time, military space weather forecasters realized the jamming wasn't from the Soviets. It was intense radio emissions from a massive solar flare. The attack was called off, averting a nuclear war that could have been started by the sun itself. 13. The day the sun vanished. In 536 AD, a mysterious dust veil, likely from a massive volcanic eruption, blanketed the northern hemisphere. For 18 months, the sun was dimmed, causing temperatures to drop, crops to fail, and widespread famine. It was described as the worst year to be alive. The global population stagnated for over a century. It was a climate catastrophe that happened almost overnight, showing how vulnerable civilization is to a single, random geological event. 14. The Lost Rescue Mission. During the sinking of the Titanic, another ship, the SS Californian, was stopped in the ice field less than 20 miles away. Its radio operator had gone to bed just minutes before the Titanic hit the iceberg. The crew saw the distress flares from the Titanic but dismissed them as company signals. If that radio operator had stayed at his post for just 10 more minutes, or if the captain had correctly identified the flares, they could have reached the Titanic before it sank, potentially saving most of the 1,500 people who perished in the freezing water. 15. The Man Who Saved the World. October 27, 1962, deep in the waters near Cuba, a Soviet submarine, the B-59, is being harassed by U.S. warships dropping depth charges to force it to surface. The submarine's crew is exhausted, communication with Moscow is cut off, and the captain believes war has already broken out. He decides to launch their nuclear torpedo. The decision required the agreement of 3 senior officers. The captain said yes. The political officer said yes. But the 3rd officer, Vasily Arkhipov, refused. He argued with the captain, calmed the situation, and convinced them to surface. That single no from one man deep beneath the ocean prevented a nuclear attack that would have undoubtedly triggered a full-scale, world-ending nuclear exchange. He is perhaps the most important person in history you've never heard of. 16. The Able Archer 83 War Game. November 1983, one of the tensest periods of the Cold War. NATO begins a highly realistic war game called Able Archer 83, simulating a full-scale nuclear conflict. The simulation is so realistic, using new codes, radio silences, and even involving heads of state, that the paranoid Soviet leadership starts to believe it's not a game. They believe it's a cover for a real surprise nuclear attack. The KGB sent flash messages to its agents worldwide to look for signs of an imminent strike, and Soviet nuclear forces were placed on high alert. We now know from declassified documents that the world was closer to nuclear war during this war game than at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. 17. The solar flare that nearly sent us back to the 19th century. In July 2012, a Carrington-class solar storm, the most powerful type, erupted from the sun and ripped through Earth's orbit. Luckily, the Earth had passed through that exact spot just 1 week earlier. If the flare had occurred 9 days sooner, it would have hit our planet head-on. The result would have been a global catastrophe. It would have fried satellites, collapsed entire power grids, and destroyed most electronics, potentially taking a decade and trillions of dollars to recover from. We narrowly dodged a return to the Dark Ages, all thanks to a lucky bit of cosmic timing. 18. The Y2K bug. It sounds like a joke now, but in 1999, the world was genuinely bracing for a potential technological apocalypse. The problem was that older computer programs only used 2 digits to represent the year, meaning 00 could be interpreted as 1900 instead of 2000. Experts feared this could cause a global cascade failure, power grids shutting down, financial markets crashing, and military systems going haywire. Governments and companies spent billions of dollars to fix the code. While some argue the threat was overblown, many computer scientists insist that without that massive global effort, we could have faced a genuine, civilization-disrupting crisis at the stroke of midnight. 19. The day a wrench almost blew up Arkansas. September 18, 1980. Inside a Titan II missile silo in Damascus, Arkansas, a worker performing routine maintenance drops a wrench socket. It falls 70 feet, bounces, and punctures the missile's fuel tank, causing a massive leak of highly explosive rocket fuel. The silo is evacuated, but hours later, the fuel ignites, causing a cataclysmic explosion that launches the 9-megaton nuclear warhead, the most powerful in the U.S. arsenal, 200 feet into the air. Miraculously, the warhead's safety features held, and it landed in a ditch without detonating. If it had gone off, it would have created a radioactive disaster zone spanning several states. 20. The asteroid that exploded over a forest. In 1908, a massive explosion flattened over 800 square miles of remote forest in Tunguska, Siberia. The blast was over 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. For decades, the cause was a mystery. We now know it was a 200-foot-wide asteroid or comet that exploded in the atmosphere. If that object had arrived just 4 hours and 47 minutes later due to the Earth's rotation, it would not have exploded over an empty forest. It would have detonated directly over St. Petersburg, the capital of the Russian Empire, instantly wiping the city and its entire population off the map. 21. The Black Death's near miss. We all know the Black Death killed a third of Europe's population in the 14th century, but what's less known is how close it came to being a true extinction-level event. The plague, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, had a mortality rate of up to 90% in some areas. But for reasons scientists still don't fully understand, a small percentage of the European population, perhaps 10%, had a natural genetic immunity. This immunity, linked to a gene mutation called CCR5 delta 32, is what allowed humanity to survive. Without that random lucky genetic quirk, the plague could have burned through the entire continent, leaving almost no one alive. 22. The dam that almost broke Los Angeles. In 1928, the newly built St. Francis Dam, a critical part of Los Angeles's water supply, began to show cracks and leaks. The dam's chief engineer, William Mulholland, personally inspected it and arrogantly dismissed the concerns as minor. Just hours after he declared the dam safe, it catastrophically failed. A 140-foot-high wall of water surged down the valley, wiping out everything in its path for 54 miles to the Pacific Ocean. Over 400 people were killed, but it could have been so much worse. If the dam had been at full capacity, or if it had failed during the day when more people were active, the death toll could have been in the tens of thousands, potentially wiping out a huge portion of the Los Angeles population. 23. The Toba supervolcano eruption. Around 74,000 years ago, a volcano in what is now Indonesia erupted with a force thousands of times more powerful than any in recorded history. It plunged the Earth into a volcanic winter that lasted for nearly a decade, blocking out the sun and causing global temperatures to plummet. The eruption was so catastrophic that it triggered a near-extinction event for humanity. Genetic evidence suggests that the entire human population was reduced to just a few thousand individuals, perhaps as few as 3,000. Every single person on Earth today is descended from that tiny, lucky group of survivors who endured the years of darkness and cold. We came within a hair's breadth of being wiped out completely. 24. The 1979 NORAD computer glitch. It's November 9, 1979. At the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, computer screens suddenly light up with the worst possible scenario: a full-scale Soviet nuclear missile launch. Submarines, ICBMs, thousands of them, are shown heading for the United States. The U.S. military is placed on its highest alert, nuclear bomber crews sprint to their planes, and the president's emergency evacuation helicopter is started. For 6 terrifying minutes, the world was on the verge of nuclear war. But just as panic was setting in, operators realized something was wrong. The raw data from satellites and radar showed nothing. The attack was a computer simulation, a training tape that had been accidentally loaded into the live warning system. 25. The Goldsboro B-52 crash. January 24, 1961. A B-52 bomber carrying 2 Mark 39 hydrogen bombs, each over 250 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb, breaks apart in midair over North Carolina. One bomb's parachute deploys and it lands gently in a field. The other bomb free falls at terminal velocity and smashes into the ground. When the military recovered the second bomb, they made a terrifying discovery. Of the 6 safety mechanisms designed to prevent accidental detonation, only 5 of them had failed.
Only a single low-voltage safety switch had prevented a multi-megaton nuclear explosion that would have vaporized a huge portion of the American East Coast and sent radioactive fallout as far as New York City. 26. The day a bear almost started World War III. October 25, 1962, at the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, a guard at a U.S. airbase in Duluth, Minnesota, spots a shadowy figure climbing the fence. He shoots at it and activates the sabotage alarm. At a nearby airbase in Wisconsin, a wiring mix-up causes the wrong alarm to sound, the klaxon that signals an imminent nuclear war, ordering nuclear-armed F-106A interceptors to take off immediately. The pilots scrambled, engines roaring, ready to fly to their pre-assigned targets inside the Soviet Union. Just as the lead plane was about to take off, a car sped onto the runway, flashing its lights, with an officer frantically waving them to stop. The intruder at the first base? It wasn't a Soviet saboteur, it was a black bear. 27. The Norwegian rocket incident. It's January 25, 1995. Years after the Cold War supposedly ended. At a Russian radar station, a technician sees a blip appear. A single missile, launched from off the coast of Norway, soaring towards Russian airspace. Within minutes, the system elevates the threat to a full-scale nuclear attack, as the missile appears to separate into multiple warheads. President Yeltsin is handed the nuclear briefcase, the Chaget, for the first and only time in its history. For several agonizing minutes, he and his top commanders debated launching a full-scale nuclear retaliation against the United States. They were seconds away from pushing the button when military intelligence realized the missile's trajectory didn't match any known U.S. missile base. The attack was actually a Norwegian scientific rocket studying the aurora borealis. They had notified the world of the launch, but the memo had somehow gotten lost in the Russian bureaucracy. Our history isn't a straight line of progress. It's a chaotic path along a razor's edge, where we were saved not by grand plans, but by forgotten heroes, lucky accidents, and the quiet moments no one ever recorded. The fact that we are here is a statistical miracle.
Which of these 27 close calls shocked you the most? Was it the bear, the computer glitch, or the one man who said no? Let me know the number and your thoughts in the comments below. I'm reading every single one. If you believe the most important stories are the ones that were hidden, hit that subscribe button and join us at Falsum as we continue to uncover the truth.